feel like the old man in the sea. Is this? Think Ernest Hemingway would have done one of these audio books. Would have done it from the water. A mouthful of rain. That's what you got to have. Let a smile be your umbrella, but don't get a mouthful of rain. My on-air send-off during the 60s. This is chapter 3. When I was at WIBG in Philly, I had an idea to change the radio station jingle. That's the melody of stations call letters are sung to. So I figured that the jingles were in the way that people thought of them as an interruption, as a song that they didn't want to hear. So I put them together. Instead of singing the station call letters to the tune of a jingle, I sang them to the melody of one of the current hits. And I put some people together to imitate the sound of the song so they would get with the rhythm. I played those call letters over the intro of the song, like during My Sweet Lord, you'd hear IBG or whatever the station's call letters were instead of jingles. They were called mingles because they mingled with whatever song was being played. The advantage of mingles was that every time a radio station played the record with the mingle, a call letter would register in the listeners' minds as part of the song. Then when they heard the song without the call letters on another station, they probably would identify with the call letters in their heads. And they might say, hey, we got the wrong station on. I thought they'd be a clever way of promoting the station without interrupting the flow. I brought the idea to my employer, Rick Buckley at Buckley Broadcasting, who I eventually worked for. And he turned it down. He hated them. Didn't want to spend the money on recording a new mingle every time a song jumped on the charts. We figured it out about 6 of them a month. But I really believed in the idea. So when I went over to Los Angeles for a radio convention, I tried to see Bill Drake. He was the #1 guy whose company, Drake Chenault, invented Boss Radio, WRKO, and in Boston, and the RKO stations, which were owned by Howard Hughes. Drake was the man who invented Boss Radio. Actually, he was partnered with a guy named Ron Jacobs, just to give him credit here, guy from Hawaii. Actually, this was a destructive force as far as personality radio was concerned. Although Boss Radio maximized the music, it cut the DJ's comments to only need-to-know information and little clever one-liners. When I was doing what I'm doing right now, which is a whole bunch of words. While it forced DJs to be very clever in short spaces of time, it killed what guys like me were doing, which was to be friendly and personable and chatty. But at the time, I thought if Drake wanted to be efficient and maximize the music time, he'd use my idea and love it, of incorporating station mingles into the songs. I tried to catch up with him at a convention, but he wouldn't see me. I hung around Martoni's restaurant, too. That was the place where all the record and radio people hung out, the bar where you found everyone in the music business, because we all drank and stuff. But he always had an entourage, so he still wasn't accessible. My next plan of attack was to go right to his office in Topanga Canyon, which I did, and I showed up at the reception area and waited and waited and waited. The receptionist said he was not going to see me. He was too busy to see anybody. Well, I figured out sooner or later you must have to come out of the office to use the men's room. So I hung out at the water fountain outside the restroom door, and eventually he went in, and I followed right behind him. I had a tape recorder with samples of my mingles. I stood next to him at the urinal and said, hey, listen to these. And I pushed the play button. A stunt like that couldn't have easily gone wrong. It could have gone wrong, but fortunately it went in my favor. Drake liked them. He took me back to his office, and we made a deal right then. He wanted me to produce mingles for all of the RKO stations, and I did. I was so excited I never even bothered to call my boss in Philly to tell him I was quitting. In fact, I didn't even fly back there. I just sent a moving truck and a bunch of people to move my things. But by the time they got there, my things had already been moved. Someone figured out I wasn't coming back and robbed my house. Well, I started my own company in LA, Joey Reynolds Associates, to produce the mingles. Although they became very popular, not everybody liked them. One night I was at a party at Martoni's, and Harry Nilsson came up to me. Like everyone else there, he was 3 Brandy Alexanders to the wind. He said, you're the guy doing those shit jingles. I said, yeah, so? You're ruining my records, man. You're trashing my performances. I said, how? He said, you add stuff over the intros of my records, of my productions. I go to a lot of trouble to make these records. I write and arrange them very carefully, even more, every note and word. And you screw them up by putting some crap over them. Well, listeners wouldn't even hear your intros, I said to him. Boy, let me tell you what happened. I got to flip the page on this one. I pointed it out. I said, if Mingles weren't there, the disc jockey would be talking over the intros. No, he said, my next record will have no intros on it, and you won't be able to screw around with it. Then we're fighting words, so I said, well, don't take a breath because I'll find a place to put something in there. And the challenge was on. You know, his next record, I'd Rather Be Dead, did not have an intro. It began with Harry singing, and he didn't stop until the end. Score one for Harry. Being a wise ass, though, I butted up the call letters to the start of the song a cappella. It made him furious. When I saw him next, I tried to appease him. I said, the stations play the records with the call letters more often, so if it's your record, you're going to get more airplay, and that's the whole point, isn't it? It increases the chances that people will hear your song and buy the record. I'm your friend, not your enemy. You're looking at this the wrong way. But he was an artist and a purist, so he decked me. And I was on the roof of the Hyatt Hotel, which on Sunset Boulevard, next to what became the Hit Factory and the Comedy Store, I think it was called. And Harry was going to throw me off. I was standing right under a billboard with his record on it. Well, within a year, I had the #1 record production company. It then moved into TV, so I was producing all the station IDs for Metro Media Television, 11, Metro Media Television, 5. Eventually, film business started coming my way. MCA and Universal asked me to do the campaign for the film Jesus Christ Superstar. I had an idea to put a live billboard on the Sunset Strip. I planned to have Ted Neely, who played Jesus on the cross, with a bunch of cast members around him singing. The idea, of course, was to stop traffic in L.A., though you really don't want to do that. A friend of mine from Philly introduced me to Jack Harris, a filmmaker who produced The Blob, and he asked me to help him produce marketing campaigns for some of the films. The first one I worked on was John Landis' film called Schlock. This was before Landis made hits like An American Werewolf in London, I think it was it. Werewolf in London, that was it. Kentucky Fried Movie, Trading Places with Eddie Murphy, he did that one. And then all of the Michael Jackson films, including what was known as, what was that called again? The Michael Jackson movie? Yeah, that was a big hit. My campaign for the movie included the slogan, "See Schlock and Roll" for Schlock. The ad campaign got better reviews than the movie. For another picture, I made a trailer that showed the MGM lion yawning instead of roaring, but the MGM suit censored it. This is before anybody could get away with any of this crap, don't forget. This is a long time ago in a galaxy far away. I did not limit myself to radio, TV, and movies, though. Once I got a call from a guy who really liked my trailers. He owned a dry cleaners next door to a pizza place on a strip mall on Santa Monica Boulevard. He said, "You're pretty good with those one-liners. Why don't you come up with something for my store's marquee?" So there was the dry cleaners and the pizza store. So while I was on vacation in Hawaii, I put up the following message on the marquee: "Drop your pants here and have a piece next door." Well, when he came back, he was mad. They weren't really happy in the pizza place either. As time went on, I did less work and more partying. LA was a very tempting candy store. I did some drugs, but alcohol was my vice of choice. I always had a mouthful of booze instead of rain, which became the metaphorical mouthful of rain I had warned listeners of years earlier. Drinking was getting in the way of my work, but as I saw it, work was cutting into my drinking. You had to look at it my way. Something had to go, so of course it was the work. I didn't want the company anymore anyway. I didn't watch it. I didn't go into the office. I didn't pay attention to the business. The company needed leadership very badly, and I just wasn't there. When I ran out of money, I just closed the door. I didn't bankrupt the company. I shut it down before any debts accumulated. I went to Hawaii for an extended vacation. I had a guy steal from me. He was running the company, and he made some deal with the bank and was arrested for forgery. And the FBI came in, and they said, he stole, I think it was $50,000, And he said, you're going to be responsible for that. So I called the airlines. I said, make it 55, and I went to Hawaii. Then I went to Aspen for an extended party because Hawaii wasn't enough. And besides, it was ski season. Alcoholism depleted my interest in doing much of anything else. So after a couple of years of partying and vacationing, I came back to LA and met my alter ego, Chester Pipkin, a very religious man, a sober man who tried to help me put my life back on track. He looked like Chris Rock. He had an afro and a mustache. Even though we had very different lifestyles, we became great friends. He was from that area of LA now that's known as South Central, and that's where Barry White's from. He persuaded me to reactivate the Mingles business on a modest basis. Chester was a musical arranger, so we went into business together. He's trying to straighten me out. He said, "The devil's got a hold of you, Joey. Gotta get an end to that drinking. I'll pray for you. You'll see." Chester thought the church would turn me around, even though he was raised a Baptist. He took me to Catholic Mass every day, even when I was barely sober enough to genuflect. You'd think a drunken wise ass like me would make a righteous guy like Chester throw up his hands and run for the hills. But instead, Chester ran for the inner city, trying to save my soul, and was such hard work. I guess he decided to do some other hard and less challenging work. He became the minister of a ghetto church in South Central, and that's where the homeless are right now. You see a lot of that around with the marketplace being filled with people who have nowhere to go, the Midnight Mission. The church is on the property of the old Pepperdine campus, which was also located in Malibu. That's their main campus, where the rich people were. There was a lot of Presbyterians there. Chester gave the abandoned campus housing to families who needed to get a start. All these people lived somewhere in commune fashion, although they had jobs in the city. Unlike most LA neighborhoods, ethnically, the people on the campus were mixed, and they were all getting along. When Chester got married, I was in the wedding party. There must have been 20 people in it. I was known as the white guy. It was the biggest wedding party I'd ever been in, and up until then, the only kind of party that didn't involve alcohol. I didn't have a good time. Chester must have kept praying for me because I finally sobered up. But I guess 7 years later. But meeting Chester was definitely a blessing. Some of his Bible lessons stuck with me. Like the story of David, I really related to him. David did everything wrong. He was made king, and he was arrogant about it and knew just how to play God. He sucked up to him and told him how wonderful a God he was. In the Psalms, he wrote beautifully of God, and God said, "David's a man after my own heart." I love that story. But David was always honest enough to admit that he was a sinner and exemplified the worst human faults. Then there's Adam. The difference between Adam and David is that Adam said it was her. David said it's me. The first human error is to blame, That's what we do. That's what kids do when there's something wrong and get caught, even presidents, because they're scared. They blame someone else. Adam blamed Eve, which was pretty dumb. It's not like he had any other friends out there to fall back on. So looking back, I chose to be more like David than Adam. I realized I don't have anyone to blame for my alcoholism. It was my choice, except for maybe Johnny Walker. I was a willing participant until the addiction took over my life, Now, let's go to the 10th caller. This is a little trivia question for you New Yorkers. What familiar melody is the station jingle 77 WABC sung to? What is that? I'll Take Manhattan, 77 by Rodgers and Hart. Such a tiny bit of the melody that folks wouldn't recognize it, so they didn't have to pay the royalties, unless they're really thinking about it. Jingles like this one can serve as a subliminal device to get you to associate the radio station with the city. New York was definitely a place I wanted to be, but I had a hard time getting here. Chapter 4 is coming up, but I'm done with 3. Is there another 4? Yeah, there is another. I guess I can read this. See, if I were drinking right now, there'd be no chapter 4. I'd be chapter 11 like I was once before. It's a Reynolds rap.